as a filmmaker, you want to have articles in the press because that's what builds your career. Like, people start to recognize you as an artist. So you need that to some degree to get money for your films. And so you need to think about what festivals that will be useful to you as an artist. What are your goals? Are you wanting to make money? Are you wanting to make another film? Are you wanting to have a public recognition? Are you wanting to build an audience? You know, like, these are all different goals. Not necessarily the same festival will give you these. Not even if you go to Cannes or whatever, you know. So you have to determine your goals first. And for me, you know, it was something that I learned about was also you have 1 year to submit your film essentially. And you can wait or you can accept offers from festivals that are small. You know, if you wait, your film has the risk of getting old and dusty, as they say, you know, which means that nobody wants it, you know. But if you don't wait and you accept the first offer, then you have the risk of not getting into a better festival. So it's like a chicken or the egg, you know. It's a contradiction saying, and so why imitate what the West is doing? You know, what you guys are doing, you know, here in Kerala is you're building your own content and formal approach to festival programming, and I think that's very smart. And I think you have a lot of engagement with the filmmakers. Over time, people will spread the word. Like, filmmakers will say, "This is the best festival I've ever been to," you know, and then everybody will want to apply here. You know?
You were talking about Spielberg's,
Spielberg,
yeah,
the one shot.
Correct. The 3.5 minutes, continuous shot which you had in the film.
Right. So, actually, it's funny you mentioned the one shot, the one take in the film, which is the longest, is 3.5 minutes, and it's at the end of the film. The weekend before I shot this, I watched a movie called The Russian Ark. Now, maybe you've heard of it. The Russian Ark is the first or the second time in history where they made a one long take without cutting the entire feature film. Like 100-minute movie without a take, without a cut. It's totally insane. Like how do you make an entire movie without one cut in the whole movie? You know, and I'm thinking about this shot and I'm like, wow, you know, I have this scene in the film where there's a dream sequence. It's dreamy. You know, I want to create the image, the impression of moving into another world, right? Because now the main character comes into this room and he sees all the characters in the movie in one location. Totally impossible. So obviously it breaks the reality down. That's impossible. And I felt like the vehicle to do this was through the one long take, because first of all, it's almost like a ghost. It's almost like a ghost is following around with the camera. When you take the character out and you're watching everybody, it's the feeling like almost like the soul, the transmigration of the soul, right? Like the soul has left the body and it's watching somebody move around, and that is something that is dreamy. This is like it's an otherworldly, transcendent state. I think that this is what I was going for with that shot. I did one long take before once, but it's like with the scene when you're robbing a bank. Like how do you study? Like, they don't teach you to do that in a film school, you know? Like how do you do a chase sequence? That's not something I learned in film school. You know, I emulated a great movie called Point Break. You've seen it? It's a surf movie. It's probably something different in my Malayalam translation, but Point Break has the longest chase scene in the history of cinema on foot. It's crazy. And when you study something like that, you're like, holy shit, like they're jumping over cars, moving through like burning, like going through houses, dogs, and like it's incredible scene, right? And so I was literally copying from that, like, how do you do it? Like, okay, you start with a tripod shot, you see them coming, you cut to a side shot, they move by like this, doom, doom, and then the third shot is handheld, and you're following them from behind as they move, and like literally, if you watch that film, you'll see this is the style. Because if this is your first movie and you don't have the time to practice everything, how do you learn to do it? Like, you have to watch references. I mean, we're not that genius. I mean, like, we can't come up with everything on our own, right? You have to study the master's works in order to, like, when you're studying to paint, you learn to paint by imitating masters' paintings. You know, I was in Spain 5 days ago, and I was to the Picasso Museum. Picasso was painting like Rembrandt when he was 16 years old. He was 16 and he was painting images that look like Rembrandt. So when the time he's 20, he's bored. He's like, I don't want to paint realism. He's like, I'm going to do something else, you know. And he does the blue period, the pink period, and then he does surrealism, cubism, you know. But first you have to copy the masters. And I think that's how...
Imitation is the first phase is art.
But it's more difficult in a movie because it's very expensive, right?
Yeah.
I mean, we would all love to have $100,000 to imitate the longest chase scene, you know. But because of the cost of it, it's very conceptual. You have to start in the conceptual sphere with film. Film is like the only art where you are. I think it's maybe one of the only things where you are thinking of the future. It's the art of planning the future. It's the art of punctuality. It's the art of planning the future. And that's why Stanley Kubrick is playing chess. Because chess is the game, maybe the only game that teaches your brain to think about the future. Because you're constantly strategizing about your enemy or your component. You're trying to think about how your component is going to move. And so chess is a game where you have to think about the future. And I think meditation and yoga is what trained my brain. Also, I'm smoking tobacco, but to stimulate my mind, but I'm sitting. The body wants to move around. How do you train the body to sit? Because when you're writing, you have to sit all the time, and you have to have stimulating ideas and sit. So you need stimulation, coffee, chocolate. I don't do drugs, but a lot of people do drugs, like Adderall is very popular in the United States, or cocaine, to stimulate your mind, and you do a lot of writing. But I was very lucky that I got in meditation and yoga, and then I drink coffee and chocolate, and sometimes I'm smoking. And so these are mental stimulations, breathing, pranayama, and what is it, pratyahara? I think it's like concentration in the Sanskrit. And there's exercises. India is one of the only cultures that, maybe the only culture in the world that teaches you spiritual practice that is useful for everything. It's not useful to go into a church for a Catholic. Like, to take Jesus as the person who your savior. No, what Paramahansa Yogananda said, you will find it yourself through self-realization. Buddha says this, that's how you create a film. You have to realize it through yourself. You can't ask Jesus to make a movie for you.
So basically, so what is your learning in the filmmaking? Have you studied any institute
I felt that because it's so expensive. I mean, my film is over $1 million. That's a very expensive movie. And how do you justify making choices? You can't practice it, right? It's not like you can paint on weekends. Well, let's just make a movie this weekend. Okay, well, we need about at least 2 actors. We need technology. You need a crew of somewhat 3 or 4 people at least, right? You can't just go and paint and practice, right? So that's why we rely on references, watching a lot of movies, and we rely on thinking and planning the future, and and in education is also very helpful because it's an environment where you do both of those things together. You are watching tons of movies and you're talking about them all the time, and I think it's important to go through it, for me at least, in order to justify and to understand. Before I go out and ask wealthy people for money and say, give me $1 million because I want to make this movie, and they're like, well, but have you done it before? No, I've never done it. Well, why am I going to give you money? If I come and say, well, I have an education, look, I went to university, and then they will say, okay, well, maybe that's enough, and I went to university in New York. Okay. I went to the public university though. I didn't apply to Columbia or NYU. Okay. I went to the Brooklyn College, which is where Bernie Sanders went.
Oh, great.
Bernie Sanders was the socialist candidate in the United States,
Okay.
and the only potential governor that was interesting to me in the last 10 years. Yeah.
Oh, great.
Yeah.
After traveling with this movie with all the festivals, you are here in Kerala, the 29th IFFK. So, what is your take from the film festivals?
Yeah, I mean, I think that there are all different types of festivals. I think that it depends on where you're located. In the United States, you can't get press. Mainstream press will not take your work unless it comes from a top festival. So there's about 3,000 festivals in the United States, 3,000. But maybe there's 20 or 30 that will be interesting for the press. As a filmmaker, you want to have articles in the press because that's what builds your career. Like, people start to recognize you as an artist. So you need that to some degree to get money for your films. And so you need to think about what festivals that will be useful to you as an artist. What are your goals? Are you wanting to make money? Are you wanting to make another film? Are you wanting to have a public recognition? Are you wanting to build an audience? You know, these are all different goals. Not necessarily the same festival will give you these. Not even if you go to Cannes or whatever, you know. So you have to determine your goals first. And for me, it was something that I learned about was also you have 1 year to submit your film essentially. And you can wait or you can accept offers from festivals that are small. You know, if you wait, your film has the risk of getting old and dusty, as they say. You know, which means that nobody wants it, you know. But if you don't wait and you accept the first offer, then you have the risk of not getting into a better festival. So it's like a chicken or the egg, you know. It's a contradiction. And so it's a difficult challenge, and you rely on asking other people and trying to get connections to programmers. You need to have connections to programmers directly, because if you go through a submitter, like, you're gonna have an intern watch your movie on the subway on an iPhone, you know. Like, I don't want somebody to watch my movie on a phone in a subway. Like, I want the programmer, I want the PK to watch my film, not like his assistant, you know. Or the sub assistant. Like, if you submit to Sundance, there's like 3 different layers, you know. You have your interns, and then you have your program assistants, and then you have the programmers, and then the jury has to, the artistic director has to approve the film. These head of festivals, they have so many different process. Well, you want to get to the artistic director as fast as possible, because that's the ultimate person that will accept the film, you know. So for me, I think that my film was fortunate to play in the biggest festival in Argentina, which is called Bafisi, which gives a lot of recognition and prestige to it, and that's why it will get into other festivals in Argentina, and to Latin America, and to Europe actually. And then it played in a very big festival in California, and I was able to get some write-ups in the journals that are interested in the film. And when you get written up, and when you get into a good festival, then a lot of smaller festivals want to program your film, because a lot of festivals, they just look at what comes out of Cannes or Berlin, and what I love about PK's and the selection committee's decision making is that they are taking a wide variety of cinema, not just taking what is coming out of Cannes and Berlin and Toronto, you know. And that's what makes a very rich, and it makes a very bold programming. It's bold, but you know what? The public might like a film that is not coming out of Cannes or Berlin, you know what I'm saying? And so why imitate what the West is doing? You know, what you guys are doing, you know, here in Kerala is you're building your own content and formal approach to festival programming, and I think that's very smart, and I think you have a lot of engagement with the filmmakers. Over time, people will spread the word, like filmmakers will say, this is the best festival I've ever been to, you know, and then everybody will want to apply here, you know. And slowly, depending on distribution, a lot of it has to do with distribution, like where your film, like certain festivals have distribution more accessible. Even Tribeca has no distribution come out this year. No films got distribution from Tribeca, and one film got distribution from Toronto. It's crazy. Toronto Film Festival has a film market. So in the West, there's not a lot of opportunities for distribution, so most filmmakers are self-distributing, which means that the production company has to raise financing for the distribution of the film. Whereas before, the distributor would buy the film from the production company. And now the streamers have a monopoly. But the streamers are using algorithms and safe programming. So if your film is political or unconventional or queer or something like this, they're not going to buy it. Because they don't want a film that's going against their corporate ethos. They want to promote, Netflix. They don't want to buy a film that's against Netflix, But so then how does that work? So what happens to our society? We all become like corporate slogs, like we're just robots for corporations now, like we become algorithms basically, and we just produce what they want. No, we can't do that. So it's an evolving culture, filmmaking, right? It's always evolving, and we have to think about ways to distribute, right? Like how to take your movie to an audience. What is your audience? And now we have social media, so we can build our own voice to some degree, right? Using Instagram or using TikTok or or YouTube, and so we can build an audience a little bit slowly, But just because you're an influencer on TikTok doesn't mean you're going to be a good actor in a movie. Actually, quite opposite most of the time. Because you do need to have an education on acting. You can't just be talking to the mic all the time and then think you're going to act in a feature movie because because you have 1 million followers. There was like a lot of actors that came out from my film, they have like 3 million followers on Instagram. And I'm like, no, I'm sorry, but you're not going to play the role in the film because you're an Instagrammer, you're not an actor, It's not the same thing, It's not the same thing. You might have an audience for Walt Disney, but not for an independent film that's revolutionary, that's avant-garde, where you're trying to engage culture,
So for all the actors are like-minded people for you to act in this movie, right? Because did you face any issues for casting?
I didn't. Yeah, because of that reason. Like you said, they were like-minded, 100%. I mean, and it's a problem in the West. Films get canceled because let's say a queer person or a straight person is playing the role of a queer person, or a non-trans person is playing the role of a trans person. Like this happens a lot in the last 5 years in the United States. A film gets canceled, right? And so I grew up. I was educated in New York City with a very rigorous identity politics. There was like an incredible amount of racial, sexual, and gender diversity in my film class. There was like 3 white people, 3 white men, and then everybody else was one person, 2 people from India, 2 people from China, like several women, lots of queer people, and so when you grow up in that environment where people are constantly talking about what is acceptable, how do you communicate based on what identity, based on what personality? Why do you have the right to speak for someone else? Why can you create an empathy, and you as an actor, how can you train yourself? I mean, some people will say that it's impossible and that it makes for an inauthentic performance. And I think that there is an interesting question, it's a margin where you have to go and say, well, what is the point of art then? Well, maybe the artistic process is about letting this person embody a different identity. Letting this actor, maybe there's a catharsis in there for both cultures, for a Pakistani to play an Indian and an Indian to play Pakistani. Maybe there's a bridging of nationalities and it will create empathy. And it will create less hostility on the border. Maybe same with an Indian and a Muslim, a Hindu and a Muslim. Maybe that creates empathy. Who knows? But still there's lots of taboos about it. Yeah. There's no way that people would accept it now. Like me as a white person, I can never play a black person, ever. But a black person could play a white person in my country. Yeah. I could never play a black person because they would say it's totally racist. But a black person could play a white person and it's okay. And it's okay because of the history of the dynamic of power structure, the imbalance of powers in the history of the United States that gives the right of the black person, in my mind, to play the role of a white character. It happens, as a comedy almost. Like there are certain dynamics that are acceptable in identity politics. So going back to your point, the characters in my film, Belgati is a non-binary actor playing a non-binary character. right? Trans non-binary, and John Luca is a gay man playing the role of a gay man in the film, Sofia Gala, I believe she is bisexual, playing the role of a bisexual, and me as well. So we all are playing to some degree. Our personalities reflect our characters in the sense of identity politics. And I think as a society, we don't want to we're not accepting of that yet. And it's understandable to some degree because, if we're oppressing peoples, there's a lot of oppression against women. So why should men play the role of women now? When women don't get the roles as much. Let the women play women, you know what I'm saying? And it's the same with queer people. Before there was tons of oppression against queer people. So why have a straight person play the role of a queer person? Why don't you choose a queer person for the role of a queer person? So it makes sense based on the history of power structure imbalance. That's what I think.
So it was just very interesting talk because you're very you're very intense filmmaker.
Very
and
intense.
We from India, from Kerala, wish you all the very big, great success and blessings from gurus.
Thank you so much.
And in your next movie is also we are waiting from now onwards for your next movie. Great.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much. Wow.